Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to the March Devo webinar. My name is Mansoor Raza. I'm the Senior Solutions Engineer with SafeBreach. I will be your host and the presenter today. Also presenting with me is Tomer Bar, who is a manager of our research team, and Valeria Lakin, who is our Director of Product Management. Just a quick reminder, please submit your questions via the Q&A function. I'll be monitoring that during the presentation. I'll try to answer them as best as I can, but we'll also keep in mind I have a Q&A session towards the end of the call. The agenda that I have prepared for us today is what is breach attack simulation? To those who are new to the space, I'm just going to cover a brief overview of what is breach attack simulation and the use cases it solves. Next is go over a brief overview and a demo of our key feature on the SafeBreach platform on risk-based vulnerability management, how we are able to prioritize vulnerability management results. After that, I'll be handing the floor over to Tomer, who will be covering the recent additions to the Hacker's Playbook, and Valeria will cover what's the new features in the product from product discussions. So what is breach attack simulation? Breach attack simulation is really how an adversary works in your environment to test the effectiveness of your controls. First, by starting by simulating the real life TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures in your environment to test the defenses in your environment, your layered defenses, and see how well you are protecting against these procedures. By using the SafeBreach platform, you can run these real-life TTPs across your environment and see how well your security controls are responding to that by really validating your controls and seeing how am I protected against these tactics and techniques and procedures. Once that is complete, right, we have the ability to visualize and visualize the data and identify the gaps in your environment. The SafeBreach platform gives you the ability to drill down into the data and into the results and identify where are the weaknesses in your environment. Okay, so you can make the decision on data-driven results, which is key. And understand where my weaknesses are in my environment and take my next decision on data-driven results. Next, we can help you prioritize the vulnerabilities that are exploitable in your environment. But with the SafeBreach platform, we understand the security landscape in your environment, and we can help you prioritize which vulnerability to address first. And I'll be covering that more in depth later in our presentation with our risk-based vulnerability management solution, what is our approach to that. Lastly is holistically remediating to defend your enterprise against these threats and these adversaries. By taking the data that we have collected in simulations and taking it back to your controls and remediating them by updating the configurations, by updating the figuring out where the weaknesses are in your environment and holistically remediating them, it will address the overall environment and give you the ability to see the risk posture in your environment. And the key of the breach attack simulation platform is you have the ability to run these simulations in your environment on demand and across your environment on demand, and in an automated fashion. You can run these on a daily basis, monthly, weekly, to see where the risk of your environment stands on a daily basis. So let's moving on to some of the key use cases that the SafeBreach platform solves and the BAS space it solves itself. Number one is security control validation. Okay, I talked about earlier where effectively you have the ability to validate your security controls in your environment from the EDR solution to how well am I protected against a specific threat to your firewall. Okay, and also remember the platform can cover all aspects of your environment, from the endpoint, perimeter, and your cloud. So specifically your cloud environment, how well am I protected in my data in the cloud environment against cloud-specific threats, against such an attack as someone attacking my S3 bucket, right? Or in my AWS environment, or specifically someone creating a, out of the ordinary, someone creating a user in my cloud environment. That's an alarm. We can test against all of those controls for you. Specifically, that's what our customers are using it for. Next, M&A. This is the really key use case for us, right? That our customers are using for. A lot of companies are acquiring companies that they have no idea what they're walking into, right? They're looking into their environment. What is their risk posture? But using the SafeBreach platform, you have the ability to test the risk posture of the company that you're looking to acquire and bring them to the standard that your required standard is, and acquiring and looking at their risk posture and measuring it to exactly to what is match your standards. Next, risk-based vulnerability management. Right, I talked about that earlier, is also looking at the vulnerability and how is that risk to your environment. I'm going to go into that more into our feature when I actually present the demo a little bit later. And last, the main use case is threat-specific, threat assessment, where we have the ability to go specifically test specific threats in your environment and see how well are your controls able to protect against that. So take, for instance, there's a particular ransomware campaign that is out, that's making headlines. How well am I protected against that? That's one option. Or if there's a particular threat group, APT29, or my favorite, APT29, or the Lazar group, if they were to attack my environment, how well am I protected against that? Because these adversaries are using specific tactics and techniques and procedures. Then if they were to attack my environment, how well my controls are going to be protecting against that. Next thing I want to get into is the product demo and specifically talk about our risk-based vulnerability management key feature. The vulnerability management integration that we have conducted and we've done in the SafeBreach platform is a complete different. We have a complete different approach than on vulnerability management. For example, you have thousands of vulnerabilities coming out, right? There's not enough time or resources in a day to patch everything in your environment. What we have done, we've taken the vulnerability from your vulnerability management solutions. We integrate with all the platforms such as Qualys, Rapid7, Tenable, bring that data into SafeBreach, marry that data with the simulations that we have run into your environment and by testing the controls in your environment, marrying the two data together and presenting you with a view and showing you which assets are most vulnerable. So what that does is prioritizes for you that I know, okay, this vulnerability is critical, it's making the headlines, which assets are most vulnerable to, that are most vulnerable in my environment. That's what I want to patch first. So to demonstrate, I'm going to actually pivot into the UI and start with that, right? First thing which you're looking at here, this is the management console. This is the SafeBreach management console, and everything is driven off of this menu here on the left, where it's centrally managed across your environment. To continue from the vulnerability management topic, we have the ability to remember. We have the ability to specifically focus on key vulnerabilities, right? So what you're looking at here is just a view on here are all the vulnerabilities that I fetched using. I have Tenable in my environment, in my lab environment. I brought that data in, and it's identifying for me a vulnerability critical CVE 6954. It's very, very critical. Okay, I can click on this information to go directly to and read about the vulnerability, but more importantly, I can show you here. Here are the assets that we have identified that are most critical to this vulnerability. Why? For the first reason is this vulnerability can be exploited one step away from the outside world. So an adversary can basically, in brief, exploit this vulnerability and attack these hosts in my environment, and take over my host, or use this vulnerability to exploit my environment. To me, this is most critical, right? Because it's exposing from the outside world. This is where I want to patch first. What that just does by bringing the data in from the vulnerability management environment and from the vulnerability management scan data into the SafeBreach, I have the ability now to prioritize, okay, these are the assets that I need to focus on first. And then, of course, move down the path, right, of patching my hosts that are step 2, step 3, and then so forth. What that's done for me, again, goes back to the point, is prioritizing the results. Prioritizing my results that, okay, I'm going to address the most critical hosts first, okay, and then move my way backwards, right? Goes back to my original point, is there's never enough time or resources in a day to patch everything, right? That's never the most effective way. If you prioritize what is the most exposed and go from there, okay? So I just wanted to point that out first. From a key feature perspective, it's, again, changing the landscape of how vulnerability management is done. And I think it's just been very well received by our customers. Next, the one I want to get into is our playbook, okay? And the playbook is really just our fancy name for our attack library, okay? We have, as you can see, we have over 27,000 attacks in our playbook already. Now, these are not just attacks that we have come up with. These are attacks that our research team has developed, taken all the attacks out in the wild, reverse engineered them, and published them into their playbook for our customers to go safely test against their environment and see how well are their security controls able to protect against these threats. Back to my use case, the first use case that I pointed out, right? The specific threats that you can now point out to. So we have a very strong filters, all these filters available for you. You can do it by attack name. You can do it by the MIBR tactic and techniques. Just to be very, very specific, what I'm going to focus on is the latest attack that Microsoft Exchange released. All I have to do is just type that in here, and it's going to bring up all the different variants for me of that attack series. And that's another key point, all the different variants, right? So when these adversaries release these attack campaigns, they don't have just one version of it, right? Our research team takes very specific process to ensure that all variants are available for our customers. So to demonstrate how easy it is to run these attacks in your environment, all you have to do is just come in here. I can pick one attack or multiple attacks, or I can pick all of them, okay? Let's just say I choose these 3 attacks. This little button is going to pop up here. The first option is I can run these attacks against all my environment, right? All the agents that I've installed, I'm going to run it across there. Or, you know what? I want to run it on a very specific environment. So I want to use it in my corporate environment. I want to run my corporate environment and my customer support environment. I already have the attacks picked. I choose the same as the attacker and the victim, okay? Now, once I have chosen which simulators I want to run this on, right? All I have to do is up here, come in here and hit run. I can run this attack on demand right now, and within a few minutes, I'll have my response back and know with empirical evidence showing that, hey, was the attack blocked, missed, or detected? Or I can add it to a queue. Furthermore, I can also come in here, schedule this. I can, I want to run this on a daily basis at 3:30 a.m. and pick my time zone and hit set. And that's it. That's as simple as of executing the attack in the SafeBreach playbook and getting a result back and showing you that, hey, was my control be able to pick up this attack and have evidence behind it. At this point, I'm going to hand over the floor to Tomer from our research team to talk about the latest additions in our playbook. Tomer?
Hi, thank you, Mansoor. Okay, so I'm very proud of our SafeBreach Labs team. It consists of first-class researcher giving talks in the most important conference, cybersecurity conference around the world. And first of all, we have a very quick SLA for emerging threats, major threats that appear now and then. I'm going to give 3 examples in the next slides, but we have an SLA of 24 hours from alert or a news about a new emerging threat until we are researching it and edit it, coverage for it, a simulation for it in our hacker playbook. And we, in the last here, we worked on weekends, on holidays, and also on work days. But the devotions from the researcher is I'm very proud of it. When I joined 1 year and a half, we already had the best coverage in the breach and attack simulation category for attacks, and we then add 12,000 attacks, and now we have 27,000 attacks. So I think we are just emerging the gap, and we are the leading. We have the leading hackers playbook. We also contribute to the MIBR attack, and you can surf there and see some of the techniques we invented or spotted, detected on the wild. Next. So the first example is the US CERT alert. US CERT is part of the Homeland Security of the United States, and they are monitoring threats in the national level for the US and for other countries globally. And we monitor those alerts. We monitor other sources as well, but this is one major thing. And the biggest threat this month was, of course, the Athenium China state-sponsored threat group attacking Exchange server. I'm sure you have heard about it. They targeted the United States, and their goal was to gather intelligence and information from number of sectors, and it was done during February and the beginning of March. Microsoft and the US CERT published this alert on, I think, the March 4, and we reacted and published our coverage less than 24 hours. The targets were very interesting. Infectious disease researchers, I'm sure you know why they are interested in that. Law firms, higher education, and NGOs, so policy think tanks. So very interesting targets. And they used a chain of 4 vulnerabilities. I will speak about this chain. Our coverage consisted of 13 attacks. So in the first day, Microsoft published 8 hashes of web shells that were used in this attack, but none of them were public. So we have a lot of sources to get this data, but in this case, no one had the binary itself, only the hash, and you cannot do a very good coverage of simulation with just an hash. So we published 8 attacks, and we monitored every day if there is a new public web shell from this list, and we found it a week later and added 5 more attacks. So it's in total 13 attacks, and we already add 3 attacks that allow you or provide you to check your current security controls and readiness for this attack, because they are using also other known attacks that we already covered in our playbook. So this time it was only 3, but you will see example later that we had more coverage for other attacks in advance. So it's very good news because you can be ready. Okay, so let's speak about the chain of the attack. First of all, the attacker, the Chinese attacker, used an SSRF request vulnerability, which allowed them to bypass the authentication of the Exchange server, and without credential, they could do anything on all the inboxes. So we know that they only used it for reading all the emails, so it's critical enough, but they could have also send emails on behalf of those victims to others, to attack others, and to delete, to change some data in this mail. So think about the mess they could have done, but they use it mostly for reading the mails. And the second stage was running two others arbitrary firelight vulnerability that allow them to install a web shell. So these vulnerabilities will work only if you are authenticated to the Exchange server. So the chain allow them to first bypass the need for credentials and then use these vulnerabilities without the need for credentials. So they have access to the Exchange server itself and run commands on this server. But they were limited to the user, if it was an IIS or if it was other web server. So the user account of it is limited. So the fourth vulnerability was used in order to escalate the privileges, and it allowed them to run any command, like in an administrator or root on the server. And from that point, they have initial access to the victim's network, and from there they did a lot of communication to the web shell, and from the web backdoor, the web shell, and from there they did a post exploitation, and they did a lateral movement first by dumping LSAS process, which include the memory include the credentials of the server, all the users, and from then on they use the PSExec. It's Microsoft signed official tool that can be used by system administrators, but also by hackers if they have the credentials. So from that point, they expand their access to the network and exfiltrated more data from other machines in the network. Let's move on. Oh, and last thing, we are publishing a voice recording explanation, a short explanation, like 2-3 minutes of this attack. What was the threat? Who was the attacker? Which was the target? What was the main attack vectors? What are the coverage that we have added? And that way, you don't need to read all the links, and there's a lot of data in those alerts. So we are coupling it together and trying to give it as simple as possible explanation. The second US CERT alert, also in February, it was by unknown threat actor, that's the UNC, but it's probably FIN11, which is a different, they have a different goal. It's not intelligence gathering. It's more of stealing money and extorting money out of victims' organizations. They target actually a legacy Excellion FTA product. And I'm not sure how much of you are using this product, but if you are using it, it's very targeted attack for you. It's very critical to simulate it and to see that you are protected against it. So even though it was not so common product like Exchange server, we also add a coverage for it. And actually, it was our world record in timing. We released this coverage in 2 hours. So it was interesting. And they started to attack victims in mid-December last year, but only on late January they used the exfiltrated data that those victims didn't know that it was exfiltrated to extort the victim, and they started to publish the stolen data on an Onion website. It's a Tor website for anonymity. So it was like a two-stage attack, and they also used 4 zero-days vulnerabilities, but they all were limited to this legacy file transfer appliance. And they also used a dedicated web shell named DuMod, and we added coverage for all the traffic to it, to the communication with it, to test different controls. If it's an endpoint control, we are dropping it to disk and see if the antivirus can detect it and quarantine it. We are loading into memory in a safe manner without executing it, and see if the antivirus or the EDR then recognize it or not, and communication with different protocols with it, sending it by mail, and etc. Okay, let's move on. The third one, the last example I will give, is about apple juice. This time it's not Chinese, it's a North Korean state-sponsored threat group. Actually, they are very active. They have a lot of campaigns. In this campaign, they targeted cryptocurrency exchange accounts, and they stole a lot of money out of victims. It's a long campaign. It started on 2018, and during that time they developed 7 different versions of this malware. Every time a security company detect them, publish the report, and it's like a cat and a mouse race. They change their tools. They got a new version. They are also using Mac OS and also Windows malwares. So it's very interesting. In our playbook, we have coverage for Windows, Mac OS, Linux, Docker, cloud attacks. So we have coverage for all of it. And they target different sectors globally, and they just used a .NET loader. The attack was a 2-stage attack. It was very interesting, and you can see that we added 22 attacks for this attack, but we already had 30 existing attacks that probably will eliminate most of the attack vector that they did. And with the addition of the 22 attacks, we give a very full coverage. So you can ask yourself, okay, so how can I use the product to run these 52 attacks? Move on and see an example. So it's just by one click. You go to reports, and there are several reports. On the left, you can see the known attack series. On the top, on the top of the screen, you can see that I chose this apple juice in the combo box. And then if I will click run simulation in the middle of the screen, it will automatically choose the relevant attack, the 52 attack. We run them on all the simulators you will choose, and it will give you a score, and you will see which security control did well, which security controls didn't do well, what should I be focused on when I want to minimize the risk. And you can get a total risk also score. Thank you, and passing to Valerie, our product director.
Hi, thank you, Tomer. Thank you, Manzur. So I'm going to cover some recent capabilities and features that were released in the recent period. One of the major capabilities that we introduced recently was dashboards, or as we call them, flexible dashboards feature. You can see this screenshot right here. And it basically allows you to create any kind of customizable dashboards, as well as the product comes with built-in use cases and dashboards for each one of the use cases that you can show to any of your stakeholders. You can schedule email reports to yourself or to other team members that you're working with. And you can also export it as a PDF, and then send it to any other entity. In terms of the visualizations that this capability allows you to do, it's pretty flexible. So there are a lot of widgets Everything is based on the simulation results that you run, and you can either look at the static posture, follow the trends, and you can break down by different aspects such as business units, target simulators, assets, by MITR techniques or tactics, and control categories, etc. So it's pretty much flexible way to cover anything. Now, some of the interesting use cases for dashboards are reporting to C-level on the posture and the progress. So you can actually demonstrate how you improve the posture over time, what are the efforts that you did, different internal campaigns. You can also focus and compare different security controls. So let's assume we have like two different locations with two different controls. You can actually compare the performance for each one of those. Or you can focus on MITR or threat. So you can actually say, I would like to see what my MITR coverage, what are the most vulnerable or tactics or techniques that I'm exposed to. And the threat-oriented thing is, as Manzoor mentioned previously, you can choose either specific threats such as ransomware, like WannaCry, or something that is related to latest threat intelligence that you have, or you can choose a threat group or something in this direction, a bit larger. And as I mentioned, eventually, once you build this dashboard, you can share that easily and improve the communication with different stakeholders in your organization. Now, other highlights and other features that we released can be seen on the next slide. We did additional capabilities. Manzoor, next. Yes. So some additional capabilities that we released were including customizing attacks. So previously you could run attacks, you could choose which ports you would like to run, which protocols you would like to run based on the existing offering that we provide you within the playbook. Now we also offer you the fully customizable attacks. So for example, if you see an attack that we published for, let's say, C2 communication and some malicious domain resolution, so now you can actually take this attack, duplicate, change the URLs, CDNs, and save that. So it's really useful if you would like to cover something specific that only you know, and it's not covered within the playbook. Other interesting capability that we call advanced actions, it allows you to run, as we call them, more advanced attacks within the playbook. And that's actually interesting because our playbook is 100% safe. And if you'd like to run a bit more interesting attacks in terms of executing them maybe in a lab environment, that you would like to increase your risk and run some attacks that might expose you to some of the risks. For example, communicating with a real C2 server and not simulated C2 server. If you would like to do something like that, so you can actually enable this capability and select the simulators that you would like to run those attacks from, and have those available as part of the playbook. Other interesting capability that we released was new planning experience, as we call it, which allows you actually to represent the multiple steps within the plan or scenario that you would like to execute. And those steps can actually be anything, starting from MITR tactics or stages of attack, and then you can actually select in the bulk different bulks attacks and represent it in a bit more meaningful way. Some other thing that was mentioned, test completion notification. You can choose who will receive the summary of the test execution, visibility into your quota, and NIST filtering. So now you can actually filter the results and see how well you're aligned against different NIST categories. So last thing that I would like to mention is that if you would like to hear more about dashboards or other capabilities, we're going actually to have a dedicated webinar just to drill in and demo those capabilities. So stay tuned and follow us on, I believe, on LinkedIn and other social channels. We'll post additional webinars and we'll dive a bit deeper in those capabilities and demonstrate them. Thank you.
Thank you, Valery. Tomer, thank you. That was excellent. Guys, I just want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, this is the time. I want to thank everyone for joining and for live Q&A session. If you have any questions, please feel free to post the questions in the Q&A chat, or we can have a live discussion on the questions. I do have a few questions here, but I want to open up to a live discussion first. If there's any questions, please, I'm happy to answer those for you. Okay, let me check the Q&A session. No. So one of the questions I have, I'll actually post it to Valery. It's more from the product side. Does SafeBreach integrate with threat intelligence solutions? Do you want to give your feedback on that one?
Yes, sure. As we envisioned the platform, it actually combines 3 different aspects. It includes the security controls validation, and that brings you the context of your real environment. The second one is the one that you presented, Manzur, today, the risk-based vulnerability management, which actually brings in the vulnerability context and, as you said, married it together with the context and the security controls posture and exposures in order to actually add the likelihood of exploitation for those vulnerabilities. And then there is the third aspect, which is threat, which is threat and comes from threat intelligence. And yes, we do added the threat intelligence integration. It's actually right now in the really early availability for our customers. And what it allows to do is to kind of tie everything together. So let's assume there is, like, in the morning, threat intel team says, hey, there's this big threat. Can we test it? So now what we allow you to do is to bring in the threat information, the indicators and different TTPs from the threat intelligence platforms, and to generate attacks on the fly, which means you don't even need to wait till Tomer or research team will publish that. You probably would have some specific threats that of your interest that we will never cover, and your threat intelligence team will be interested to run them. So you will have this capability to generate attacks, run them, and see the posture and communicate that using dashboards and other capabilities.
Excellent. Thank you, Valery. I do have a question posted in the chat. How do you marry the vulnerabilities with your controls? That's the first part of the question. And second part is, and how do you provide the visibility based on the MIBR tech framework? So I'll take the first part, and Valery, please jump in if I miss anything in the product side. But to answer the question, how do you marry vulnerabilities with the controls? So the thought is, like I said in the presentation, is we bring in the data from your vulnerability management solution. Like I said, we integrate with all 3 platforms, and all the 3 main vendors out there: Rapid7, Tenable, Qualys. We'll bring the vulnerability data into the SafeBreach platform and take the simulation data that we have run, the SafeBreach platform has run, marry the two together, and based on our intelligence, we provide the results back to you and show you which assets are most vulnerable to those vulnerabilibilities. Valery, do you have anything you want to add to that thought? Or
maybe to highlight some details on that, if that would be interesting. So what we do exactly is, based on the simulation results, which brings this context that I mentioned before, we defined a set of scores. One of them that Manzur presented is the accessibility from external attacker. So it's measured in the number of steps, or the other score, for example, is attack surface. So it's basically represented by the percentage of not blocked simulations related to the assets that expose those vulnerabilities. And there are a couple more. Now, what we do is provide you the option to choose what is more important to you. And we also have some built-in options. And eventually doing some kind of weighted average scoring for that, including the severity of the vulnerability that comes from the VM tools. And in that way, we generate a SafeBreach score that includes from one side the vulnerability score and severity, from the other side, the likelihood of the exploitation of this vulnerability based on SafeBreach scores that we generate. And this together brings you the prioritized list of vulnerabilities. And sometimes you would be really surprised to see that some of the critical vulnerabilities would actually be on the bottom of the list. And the reason is because those scores will bring up other stuff that is more important, that exposed in a shorter path from the external attacker, etc. So I hope that brings a bit more light to that. And as to the second part, Mansour didn't touch that as part of this webinar, but actually we have a really nice MIBR heatmap that you can view. Mansour, you can show maybe. That we can actually view all the results based on MIBR heatmap representation. There are also several views that you can take a look on it. There is a prevention view, and there is also a kind of detection view. And our playbook mapped to MIBR fully, which means we cover almost the full matrix of MIBR, and which is the techniques that are possible to cover, of course. And here's the view. You can actually see which are techniques you are better on, which are techniques that you're less good. You can drill into the results and dive into specifics, or as Mansour opened right now, you can also filter that by specific themes. So, for example, if you are interested for threat group or
Yeah, so thank you for that, Larry. So what I was going to put into to answer the question specifically, how do we map to the MIBR attack framework? We take all the attacks that we have in our playbook that what I was pointing out earlier, over 27,000 plus attacks. We map them and classify to the MIBR tactic, technique, and the sub-techniques. Once that everything has been classified, okay, all you have to do is just run those simulations, and we build this heat map out for you automatically. Now, just to demonstrate, I can easily quickly take a view here and see, okay, take a glance and see where am I weak at, right? Which area, which tactic or technique am I weak at? Or I can filter it by and say, you know what, show me if APT 29 were to attack my environment, right? Which taxing techniques would, how would I measure against that? And you can filter it by this also. So to be very specific to answer your question, right, is how do we provide the visibility? We provide you a detailed heat map, and this data is not static, right? You can easily filter it by threat group, by technique, tactics, by threat type. And then when you can come in here and you can drill down and go directly into the results and investigate, you know, why am I missing these attacks, right? Open up the results and investigate and further how can I resolve this, and come down here, here's the remediation. Now, theoretically, if I take these attacks and remediate them, this section should turn from red to green. I hope that answers your question. Jessica, do we have any other questions? Let's see in the Q&A. No, but I do have one more. This is one that actually I always get is something that is, how does breach attack simulation differ from regular pen testing? So how does it differ from regular pen testing in a couple of ways, right? And the thing, pen test is just attack point in time, right? I run the pen test, or companies run the pen test maybe monthly, quarterly, or a few times a year. But once you run that test, if the attack comes out the next day, and a new attack is released the next day, that data is old. With the breach attack simulation platform, with the SafeBreach platform, you have the ability to continuously monitor the risk posture of your environment. That's the biggest differentiator between us, using the SafeBreach platform and using a pen test. Also, the key differences is a pen test can only cover so many aspects of your network. With using the SafeBreach platform, you have the ability to cover all aspects of your platform, from perimeter, endpoint, cloud, email, and run the attacks automatically on demand on a regular basis and get the risk posture daily. So I'll stop there. There's some few more questions. I'll go to the next one. An attack might begin from any tactic or technique, and it's not necessarily unidirectional. How would you assign weightage to different techniques for different attack types, say ransomware? Valery, Tomer, do you guys want to take that one?
Yeah, so we are not treating the entire flow of the attack. Each simulation is simulating a MITRE technique, or a technique that we researched and developed based on our knowledge and experience. And each of those we simulate it, see if it is bypassing, or if the security controls missed it or not. And each of them have a different weight. So if it's an initial access, it's different than the collection of data, because after the attacker got an access to all the chains and is on the computer collecting the data, he will succeed eventually on doing that. So we have a model of calculating how important and critical this exact simulation in the overall of the attack. So we can give you a good mirroring of what we see in our experience of which is the critical parts to mitigate, and which one you can prioritize later.
And I would like to add here something that we maybe can cover in a follow-up webinar as well. What we do in addition is we have a dedicated module within the platform that provides you the prioritization and allows you to understand where to start, what is the biggest exposure and risk to your organization based on the simulation that you run, and the module called Insights. And then within that module, we actually calculate and provide you the prioritization of what is more important and what is the probability, let's say, of the ransomware happening based on all the ransomware simulations that we run inside. But I believe we are kind of on top of the hour right now in terms of the webinar, so we can cover that in the next session.
Actually, I know that we don't have a lot of time, but I see another questions about ransomware. I hear that it's interesting, and the question is, if we filter a heatmap for ransomware, what will be your approach to do that? So I will describe in 3 sentences our approach for ransomware. So we have 3 different levels of sophistications of ransomware. The first level is just the exact IOCs of known ransomwares. We have hundreds of simulations of known IOCs, and IOC is the indication of compromise. And if your antivirus, EDR, IPS doesn't detect those, this is not good. But most of the time they are updated and they work. The second level is we mimic the exact APIs, Windows APIs or Mac OS APIs or Linux APIs that this ransom family do. But it's not the IOC, the hash of our simulation is not known in the world. So if it's only based on known signatures, the security controls detection, it won't detect it. So we can differentiate between different security controls and how well they are against ransomware. And our third level is we are not even mimicking the same APIs, but we are mimicking the same results. So for instance, if we have Maze ransomware, and Maze ransomware uses a specially designed algorithm like, I don't know, AES 256 and asymmetric RSA 4096 in different ECB mode, we will do the same, exactly the same. We will encrypt files, and we will add the same extension to the encrypted files as Maze, and we will see if your behavioral detection can detect those specific reactions, not the methods that the malware is using, because they can change those methods. And we want to see if we will do that, if we will catch them or not. So this is an example of our approach for ransomware, and you can get a score if you are just on the first level, the second level, or you are fully protected from all the three.
Thank you, Tomer. Valerie, that was very insightful. Thank you, guys. I hope that answers everyone's question. We're just brushing up against our time window. Is there any other questions I can answer? I'll be glad to do that. We just have a couple of minutes left.
There's a question regarding the recording of the webinar. Will it be available for the offline view?
Yeah, just already answered that. Yeah, so guys, I want to thank everyone. At this point, I'll close the webinar out. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to join our call, and look forward to seeing you on the future webinars that we have coming up next month. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.